So we're going to be talking about adding integers today. So let's do a real life problem in this. A football team gains 8 yards on their first play, 5 yards on their second play, loses 1 yard, and 6 yards on the third and fourth respectively. Which integers can be used to represent each play? So we're having a football game and there are 4 plays. So on the first play, we're going to represent what integer would represent that first play. So the first play would be 8. We'll denote it right now by a positive 8, but later on, in order to show a positive integer of 8, you would just need to put 8. On the second play, what integer would you use? So on the second play was a positive 5. Third play, so it would be a negative 1. It would be negative 6 on the fourth yard because they lost 6 yards. So which integers can be used to represent each play? Positive 8, positive 5, negative 1, and a negative 6. How many yards did the team gain after 2 plays? So we would add the first play yards plus the second play of yards, and it would be 13 yards. If we took the 13 yards, which were the first 2 plays, and then we wanted to add the third play yardage, what would that be? I'm going to put 12 right here since I'm running out of room. So if they had gained 13 yards, but then actually lost 1, they would be, total of the 3 plays would be 12 yards. Our second to last question says, which expression could you use to find the total number of yards the team gained or lost after the 4 given plays, and then evaluate the expression? So we will put each integer that represents each yard and let's just total them from left to right. 8 plus 5 is 13. Plus a negative 1 would be 12. Plus a negative 6. Let's say hypothetically they were on the 12-yard line. And then they got backed up. They went a negative 6. They would end up 6 yards. So on those 4 plays, they gained 6 yards. They went 8 on the first, then they went 5 more on the second, then they went back 1 on the third, and then from there they went back 6 more. So their total yards gains for those 4 downs were 6 yards. So you'll notice the absolute value. Its definition is the distance between the number 0 on the number line. In notation, when you get ready to note absolute value, the number will go between these 2 bars, symbolizing absolute value. So since absolute value is the distance between the number 0 on the number line, distance is always going to be a positive number. For example, you have never walked a negative 5 miles. You do not run negative 2 miles. So anytime you are finding an absolute value of a number, it will always be a distance, so it will always be a positive number. So the absolute value of 6 would be 6 because it is 6 tick marks or 6 spaces from the 0. The absolute value of negative 6 would be 6 as well. An absolute value is a positive value because it represents distance. So in number 3, we're going to find the absolute value of the number. The absolute value of 100 is 100. If you had the absolute value of negative 9 is, so that would be 9. The absolute value of 0 will be 0. The absolute value of negative 4 would be 4. So again, Absolute value will always be distance, will always be a positive number. So let's evaluate these. I'm going to pause the video and come back and check your work. Notice that in each of these, it's a positive number, the distance from 0 on a number line. Now we're going to compare using less than, greater than, or equal to. Again, I'll pause the video. We'll come back and check our work. Notice the absolute value in A of 10, negative 10, is 10. The absolute value of 10 is 10. Those are equal to. Below, we've shown what each and every one represents. The absolute value will always be positive. Anything with a 0 exponent will be 1. Now, we will have rules for adding integers. Number 6, there are 3 rules to follow when adding integers. The first rule you've done since you were in elementary school. When both integers are positive, the answer is positive. So in your example, 10 plus 14 is 24. The second rule. When both integers are negative, the answer is negative. Example is negative 7 plus negative 5 is equal to negative 12. Be careful with parentheses. That parentheses is just helping you be less confused because it's adding a negative 5. It's not a grouping symbol, it's just to help the problem look less confusing. In our last rule, when one integer is positive and one integer is negative, you subtract the absolute value of the 2 integers and keep the sign of the larger number. Let me read that again. When one integer is positive and one integer is negative, you subtract the absolute value of the 2 numbers and keep the sign of the larger number. An example, a couple examples of those. First example is 13 plus negative 9. We're adding integers. We notice that the signs are different. So you subtract those 2 integers using their absolute value. So we would say 13 minus 9 is 4. And to determine what sign, if it's going to be a negative or a positive, you take the larger absolute value sign. In this case, was a 13, so your answer is a positive 13. In example 2, again, notice we're adding integers. Each of the signs are different. Negative 25 plus 3, they're different signs, so you subtract. To determine if it's a positive or negative, you look at the larger number, which is 25, and so your solution would be a negative 22. Now, I'm going to pause the video. We will do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and come back and check our work. So notice in A, different signs, we subtract your absolute value, and you have a positive 3. B, they're both the same. You're adding negative, so your answer is going to be a negative. C, they're different signs, so you subtract their absolute value. We have a positive 2. Look down at G. Notice as we were adding, instead of having to add them from left to right, we noticed that some canceled each other. For example, negative 1 plus 1 equals 0. Then we had a positive 3, and if we added that to negative 3, that would have been 0. Then we had a negative 9 plus a positive 9, that equals 0. Number 8. Aaron has kept track of his earnings and expenses for 1 week. Find the sum of his earnings and expenses. So let us add these together using the integers that represent what he did that week. So for example, he had $12 in allowance. Then he actually had to pay for his field trip, which was -3. Then he earned $13 cutting lawns, and then he had to pay his sister back $5. Now there are two methods you could do this. You can go from left to right, solving 2 at a time. Or another method is add up all the positive integers, get your sum, then add up all your negative integers, get that total, and then use your integer rules for that. So let's add our positive integers. 12 plus 13 is 25 plus. Now let's add all of our negative integers. I have a -3 plus a -5, which is going to be -8. Now with my integer rules, I'm going to subtract those two integers because they're different signs, and I will get 17, and then I'm going to check to see if it will be a positive or a negative. And I notice that that the 25 is the larger. So his final amount of money that he'll have would be $17. Now, in these examples, we're asked to use mental math in A, B, C, and D. In example A, something plus -5 is going to equal 8. So in your head, think of a number line, if that's helpful. And you're going to start at -5. And how are you going to end up on 8? So think about the units that you went through. If you were at -5, how many units did you move to get to 8? So if you move 13 units, I would encourage you to put in 13 and to see if that answer is correct. Plug it in, check your work. So notice that we have a negative plus a positive. They're different signs, so I would subtract. 13 minus 5 is 8. Should it be a positive 8? Yes, because the 13 is positive. So I'm going to ask for you to look at B, C, and D. If you need to use a number line to determine how many units you went from one number to get to the answer, and then plug it in to see if you're correct. I'm going to pause the video. You can come back and check. No, we went back and checked our work, and our final answer will be the variable. The variable will be equal to the integer put in. So that would be your final answer. Here's some review problems. I'm going to pause the video. We'll come back and check our answer. Notice, if it has a negative exponent, we put the reciprocal of it. Check your work. Absolute values are positive, and anything to the 0, exponent will be 1.